Welcome to this week's video. Grab a drink and some snacks and settle in for a long one. This video is all about the stove. From Peter's first decision to swap out the multi-fuel stove for a diesel one, all the way through to the end where you see it in all its glory. I hope you find it interesting and informative, and I hope above all that you enjoy it. Welcome to this week's video. Today we're going to be talking about the decision that has been made to invest in a Refleks diesel stove. Our reasons for doing it, or more particularly Peter's, because I don't hunt bags of coal around, he's the one that does that. Yeah. So we're going to cover a few points, but firstly, the reason for doing it.
This is kind of future-proofing the life on the boat.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of effort involved with coal. The last time we bought some, we had to carry it 100 kilos of coal to the car, and then when we got here to the pub, we had to carry them across the car park, down onto the jetty, then in, and then I wrestle them under the bench to keep them out of sight. So there is all of that, and the kindling, and the other issue then is dealing with the waste. Then there's the ash bucket, and when you're constantly refilling the coal scuttle, the bags always seem to have holes in these days, and so there's always coal dust leaking out onto the well deck. And if you're a bit clumsy, and even if you're not clumsy, but the ash gets everywhere when you're trying to put it into the ash bucket. I always close the door to the cabin before I empty the tray into the bucket, because it doesn't matter how carefully you do it, the air is full of dust in the well deck.
The space that it takes up is another issue. We've got we're blessed with a really decent sized well deck. We have had some lovely meals out there, drinks out there. We've entertained out there with a couple of friends. It's not huge, but that being said, if we didn't have the kindling out there and the coal out there and all the paraphernalia to do with a multi-fuel stove out there, it would be a really pleasant space to sit out there, and we could use it more often. Especially in the winter when the fire's going, we open the doors and the heat just goes out and it warms that space. So it's like an extra room to the boat, which is why we like it. And why we have a cratch cover, but that's another story.
But the other thing is that, of course, it's worse in the winter, because at some points we've got a wooden bench there. There'll be maybe 3 25-kilo bags of coal underneath the bench, maybe another couple one either side. And if we're not storing coal under that wooden bench, then there's other things can go under there, because there's a big grey bucket. Box, I suppose, on the well deck, full of cleaning, mops and cloths and all that sort of thing, and that could go out of the way as well, and that would leave just the one essential item, which is Flan's litter box. So
have you done any calculations about the running costs, or at the moment that isn't really a factor because everything else outweighs it? I did some figures. The trouble is, at the moment, prices are changing so rapidly. Yes, so it's not really worth specifying costs of things. So there will be a financial outlay to this venture, but there is with anything that you try, all boat improvements, and we see this as a boat improvement incurs a cost.
Yes, it's the price has worked out to be the usual boat price, which is more than that. Whatever you think it might cost, it's more than that.
Yes, okay. So so really the cost of the new stove will just have to be factored into the length of time you're going to be using it, and it's one of those consumables, I suppose, that you put down when you're investing in things like double glazing, which we've had done, or new crutch covers, which we've had done, and painting of the boat, which we've had done. So this is yet just another boat improvement along the way.
What started me on this, thinking seriously again, was somebody just had a stove changed over, but they did it just before Christmas when it was like -6 degrees, and it's a 2-day process taking out the old stove. So they spent a night on the boat with ice forming on the inside of the windows. So I thought, yes, I'd rather not do it that way. So I've talked, the company I'm talking to, I've said, well, we're thinking maybe September, so the end of in the autumn anyway. The maximum heat output of the Morso Squirrel, according to Morso, is 4.5, not 45, 4.5 kilowatts. I probably rarely run it at maximum efficiency, because that means simply in the spring and the autumn I build a smaller fire.
Right, okay. So you can regulate the temperature more easily.
Yeah, so I'm pretty confident that that stove will work.
Okay,
yeah.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we've probably covered all the points that I wanted to cover with regards to the Morso and also the new stove. What's the name of the new stove?
The one I'm looking at is the Refleks 2000K, and it's either the KV or the K.
So going over to a Refleks stove, it runs on diesel. Do you connect it up to your main diesel tank, or do you have a separate diesel tank? Those are the two options really. One would require additional piping from the stove through to the main tank, I suppose, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And the other would involve a separate tank positioned, in our case, in the well deck. So what are your thoughts on that, and what are the options available to us?
Well, the first time I'd heard about these, they had a a day tank, as it's referred to, a small tank. This was somebody in Scandinavia who was talking about using the same model of stove but on a cruiser for living on, and they then had a pipe from the day tank down to their main diesel tank, and I think they had a hand pump, so you just check the level in the day tank, and just every now and again you just pump some fuel through.
Okay.
That seemed like a neat solution, because then there's you're only filling up from one point when you're filling up with fuel. The downside on this boat is that we're 59 feet long, and the stove is about as far away from the fuel tank as it's possible to be.
Yes.
So it's a good 50 feet away, and it would mean running a pipe all the way down there, tapping into the main diesel tank, fitting a pump, and either an electric pump or a hand pump, and so forth. And I've kind of gone away from that idea now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think the other option is, and I'm just going to do some measuring today, but the other option is you can buy standard size day tanks to fit close to the stove, so there's a gravity feed down to the stove, and then when you're filling up in a marina or with a fuel boat, you just put the nozzle into the main tank to fill that, and then you go down and just fill up the diesel tank. To do that, you need a reasonable sized one. So one of the options I'm looking at is a 50-litre standard tank, which I'll do the measurements to see where it might fit. I've got an idea where I'd like the diesel tank to go, and then just top that up, and that should run the stove, even in cold weather, for 2 weeks or more.
Well, that's not bad, really.
Yeah. The stove consumption, I think, is between 0.1 litres an hour and 0.25, I seem to remember. I should have remembered that, but yeah, let's say 0.3 to be on the safe side. And that depends on where you've got the heat setting. But I also, because of where we are and the fact that I can't get to a marina at the moment, and the fuel boat can't get to me for various reasons, I invested in a 20 litre fuel can. So consuming it at around 0.1 to 0.2 litres an hour, even a 20 litre fuel can will last a long time. So if there's a 50 litre tank and a spare tank as well, that should cover everything. If the standard tank doesn't fit very comfortably, there is also the option of having a custom tank made to fit whatever the space you've got. That's a bit more expensive, of course, which is why I can't really put a figure on the whole thing, because there are a lot of variables. Like I said, I'm inclined to go for the stove with the heating coils in, but that's a fair bit more expensive than not having them. But if I decided in the future that I wanted to put radiators in, it's pretty much a rebuild of the stove, because I've checked that. It's not a simple thing to add the heating coils after the stove's installed.
Right.
So I would be inclined, unless of course I get to the point and I think, I really don't want to spend this money, so I'll make a decision and go for maybe the cheaper option. So it all can vary quite a bit.
Well, the main reason for getting the coils fitted is because I get really cold legs underneath this dinette. So I've also mentioned the fact that maybe we could look for another heat source that would do that job, because if that's the only reason for going through all that expense, it seems a bit wasteful almost. But we'll go and have a look at what other heating sources there are just for this little space under the dinette, and if it turns out to be an efficient way of heating this space, then that might be the way forward.
I suppose that's the thought, yes. If there's something like an updated version of the old paraffin heaters we all used to use, and certainly I did in various places I lived, but doesn't burn paraffin and doesn't have to be plugged in.
Yes.
Generally, you don't want to use electricity to heat things up.
Yeah.
Or as little as possible, because it's generally not the most efficient way of using electricity. So you can see we haven't really got very far down that route. But
no, that's just an idea at the minute, but I think as we're not getting anything done to push this forward until later on in the year, we've got time to explore other avenues, really. How many companies in the country actually fit this?
I've found one so far.
Right. So they've. Would you like to
No,
mention?
that's not true. I found two, but one does the Refleks stoves. The other one does bubble and another one.
So there are 3 different makes.
Yes. Oh, and there is the other option, which would be cheaper. I could have the option of getting the Morso stove converted to be a diesel burner.
Ah.
But you don't, yeah, so everything else would be the same. I could then still fit a back boiler to the Morso stove and have radiators. The only difference is it wouldn't change the form of heating, so it would still be radiant heat rather than...
Yeah, and it wouldn't be
warm air.
controllable, I would have thought, in the same way, would it?
No, apparently you get the same controller.
Oh, right, okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
So, but the heat radiates out. I don't know what the efficiency is, so I don't know whether you can still get 4.5 kilowatts out of it.
Yeah, but in this instance where we want to reclaim back as much space as possible on the boat for other purposes, I think the Refleks is the way to go, isn't it?
Yeah, the Refleks is physically smaller. It's round rather than rectangular. It's slightly taller because it has a metal cap on the top which you can use as a hot plate. But it is
its footprint is smaller.
It's narrower, so yes, so the corner where it goes will have will be less full. You can see then where the coal goes.
Yep. It's very dusty and grey under there.
I bet it is, yeah.
And there's the ash bucket that we've got, and more kindling round here.
Nearly full.
Yeah, that's almost ready for emptying. More kindling. Oh, kindling bag.
Kindling bag.
Lots of single-use plastic.
Coal bag. Yeah.
Lots of single-use plastic, and this is what we would be getting rid of if we went over to the diesel. So all of this would be clear. We'd rehouse all of that and get rid of the grey tub.
Yep.
So, and the mop here and the broom would be fixed to something under there, but that's where we're hoping, is that right, to put the tank?
Yes, yeah.
One, two, three. There we go.
Mind your back.
Yeah.
Both
For
of
your
you.
legs.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. Once you've got it up, it's actually not so bad, is it?
Yeah, you're right.
Take a break. There we go.
Well, we managed to get the stove out, and I managed to hoist it up the 2 steps onto the well deck.
I hasten to add that he did that on his own. This great big wrought iron or cast iron stove. Yeah.
Yes, I checked today, and sure enough, the unit weighs 70 kilos, but there was a big hole where the flue goes in the top, so I could get a hand in there and get a good grip of it. And I've got a spare mooring line in the engine room. So I got that out and wrapped it round a double length underneath the stove and over my shoulders, and then tied it when I was in a crouching position with a straight back, of course. And that meant that I could then lift with my legs as well as my arms, and I was able to heave once up onto the bottom step, and then a shuffle, then a heave twice onto the second step. Not this quickly, I have to say. There's a bit more of a pause for a rest in between each one, and then a third one over onto the well deck itself. But that meant that I could, well, we could then clean up the area where the stove has gone, and now we are looking at retiling that area. So we've been looking at tiles today.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's more my line of exploration and research, whereas stoves and things is Peter's.
Yes, I must say I'm looking forward to getting the new stove now, and it is a huge benefit that the stove was sold before we've moved, because I was thinking that I was going to have to stop somewhere along the way and then sell it, somewhere like Banbury or even Leicester. But I advertised it and I got, I think, 6 responses, and the first one to arrive just gave it a quick glance over. I'd sent lots of photographs, and it just said, right, there's the money, which he handed to Marianne.
Yes, he did.
And then he and his friend and the three of us, we hoisted it into the back of a rather small car.
It was a Ford Fiesta, I believe.
and they took the flue pipe as well, which I've got no use for.
And neither did they, but they said they'd dispose of it.
They'll probably get some money for scrap, but I don't know how to do that or who to talk to, so they're welcome to it.
So, to recap, what we have left to do in preparation for the new Refleks stove is the tiling of the corner. Oh, you forgot to mention that when you took a screw out,
I just remembered that.
we had a surprise spurt of water, or you did, I haven't seen it yet.
Yes.
So, what happened there?
Yeah, there were 4 metal brackets screwed to the floor of the stand that the stove was mounted on. That screwed to the legs of the stove. And one of them, when I undid this long screw, water started coming out of the screw hole.
Right.
Not gushing out, but coming out fast enough. And I put the screw back in without the bracket, and the water stopped. And then I waited and listened, and well, in fact, for the rest of the day, I kept an ear open to the water pump, and it hasn't been running, so I assume at the moment that I've closed off the hole. The only thing is, I have no idea why there's a water pipe under there, if that's what it is. I don't think they drilled through the base plate.
I hope not. Otherwise, is that why we're listening?
Yes,
okay.
We are noticing the difference, having taken a 70-kilo stove and a flue which must have weighed a good 10 kilos out of one side of the boat. It is now tilting slightly the other way.
Yes.
But yes, one of the things for this week is to cut out the grouting and take out the floor tiles that are down there and see what's going on underneath and why there's a water pipe there. Because the way this boat's arranged, the kitchen sink, the shower and the bathroom basin are all on that side of the boat, and the stove is over here, and that's where the leak was. So I don't know why there's a water pipe under there at all.
Well, that would be something for you to discover. So that's one of the things that we need to do, or that Peter needs to do. And then the next thing from that would be tiles.
Yes.
After you've spoken to Lockgate and found out what holes they need to be drilling through.
Yes.
For the pipe work. And then the other thing is that the well deck is in a bit of a sorry state. The paintwork hasn't lasted from when Peter had the boat repainted, 2 years ago? 3 years?
Coming up three years.
All right,
now.
so 3 years ago, and the paint in the well deck only seems to be 1 layer thick, when we were assured it would be more than that. So there's rust spots, and it just hasn't worn well at all. So that's a job to do, is to get that repainted without having Flan walking on wet paint.
That's the most challenging part of the job, is Flan is used to walking out onto the well deck to use his litter tray and also to get on and off of the boat. So I'm going to have to think of a way of, I may have to paint the well deck in stages. That's the only thing. Now that the stove has gone, I'm busy working on the stove mounting ready for the new stove. And one of the problems I have to deal with, you can see in that there's a dark patch on the baseboard, and when I undid the screws that were holding the brackets down, holding the old stove, water came out of that hole, and it puzzled me at first. But what it is that I have pipes running all the way around the boat, it turns out. They come, let me spin this around, well, you can't really see, but way down in the distance there, you can just about see the engine room door there. Beyond there, there's the Eberspacher, which provides hot water and also central heating. So there's a pair of grey plastic pipes that run all the way down the side of the boat in this boxed section here, and they run through, they supply a radiator in the, behind the stove, and that there's the shower room and there's a radiator in there. It provides a radiator here, which I've now unboxed because I needed to get in there, and then it runs along the bottom there underneath the steps, comes underneath this board, so it goes along the back close to the wall, turns around that right angle bend, and then goes all the way back down again, all the way down this side of the boat, down to beyond the kitchen area where there's another radiator, and that's the end of the run. And those two pipes, just get the zoom right, are going under there, and the screw to hold the stove down went into one of those pipes. And we've got a slightly odd view there because it's wide angle, and that's more or less. So you can see it was all right to start with. I've turned off the stopcocks at in the engine room, so there's no more water getting into this system, but I need to look under that board to see what's happened to the floor underneath. Unfortunately, it had tiles on it, so I removed the tiles, and it was screwed down, so I removed all the screws, and it still wouldn't come up, and I've had to hack away the wood trim, and I'm in the process of levering it up because it's glued as well as screwed, which is a bit over the top, I think, and it doesn't allow for any future maintenance such as what I'm trying to do now. I need to fix the hole in that pipe somehow or other. And you can see here as well, this area where the trim is, inside there was pieces of plasterboard. That's what word I'm searching for. Yes, plasterboard with tiles on. So they were nailed to the wall using these very small panel pins. So I've removed those to make it easier to access this corner. Once I've sorted out the problem, then I can decide how we're going to present this area ready for the new stove, which will be coming in at the end of next month, the end of July. So far out there's the plasterboard with all the tiles on the other side, and so now I'm going to have another good go at levering this board up. So this is where we've got to with the fireplace. The floorboard was very difficult to get up, but we've got it out now and it's drying out. I'm just going to lift it again, if I can. Oops. And there we can see underneath it's almost completely dried out now. I'll check that corner piece, but those are the two pipes which run down the boat to the radiator. So you can just about see down there that dark spot. That's the repair in the leak. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit on it. Oh, there we go. It's a bit blurred, isn't it? Anyway, so now we're going to look at tile.
Well, as you saw from the footage before this, Peter's had a job on his hands with the stove area because we're getting the new one. But what have we come out to do today?
Looking at tiles to re-tile the area.
Yeah. Have you any ideas of what kind of tiles you're looking for?
Up to a point, so a little bit. I want it to be quite a light colour, so that we don't end up with a dark corner. It's going to have a copper coated stove and copper guard on the flue, so it would be nice to have it as a light corner. And I'm thinking about maybe trying to eliminate one of the dust holes that by the steps as well.
Right.
Sharp, so be careful of that.
Wow, okay.
Very sharp. Job done. Right, for that, yeah. They'll keep that. Where the trim goes, I just do this and it grips the trim. I suppose I trim at the top. Lovely. Just cut the slot out so it slides right into the back, so you don't have any gaps in theory.
Oh, perfect.
That's good.
That looks lovely.
Even so, it was a heck of a job, and I never looked at that again.
You happy?
So I've got the overlay so that it wouldn't get the tuck under it.
Tuck under it and you could bend it over. Yeah. Oh, how come so long? Sometimes I do it on the tile, sometimes I do it not. Okay, I'll grab it for you.
Peter's bid in an effort to get to Northampton to have his stove fitted was foiled by a couple of broken locks en route to Northampton between Foxton and his end destination. So he has ended up here in Market Harborough, in the wharf, Union Wharf. And this is where he will remain to have the stove fitted. Lockgate Stoves will send their people down here, and Peter will have a lovely new stove. It's an ideal location because, as you can see, he's up against the brick bank and there's parking around the back, so it's easy for the engineers to bring their tools and equipment to the boat. But in the meantime, Peter can enjoy this lovely scenery and yet another pub. This is the waterfront.
And the supplies are arriving. There's the new stove, all in its wrapper. And over here, there's the fuel tank that's going to go in the well deck. And all the other bits that we need. And somewhere or other there'll be a flue to go in that hole. So we won't have any more of that horrible stain on the side that the coal gives us. Okay, work is continuing. As you can see, I've now got a new chimney stack there, and they're busy now fitting in the new fuel tank and ready for setting it all up and testing. They don't sell diesel here, so I'm using a new hand pump that I recently bought to pump some diesel out of the fuel tank. And there it is. I can't show it working because it needs two hands to operate it, so I can't film that, but you just pump that up and down and it's pulling the diesel out of the fuel tank just there and into the jerry can, ready to be used.
This is the fuel feed coming through the tiles and all the way down, and it will eventually join up with that valve you can see there into the back of the stove. Here is a photo of the tank in place. It's a perfect fit height-wise. It will stick out a little bit, but that was only to be expected.
So here we are with the stove in place, including the nice copper heat shield.
So we've got a tank there, 50 litres, screw top, show you how that works, pretty obvious, screws down tight. We've got a second breather on this side anyway, so there is a pinhole breather on the top of that, but they like to have the proper flame trap ones for that size tank. Nice action tap there, if you want an isolated system where you're going to leave it for a good while, don't need it through summer, give that a turn. That shuts the whole system down.
Right.
Yeah. It's all nicely clipped up around there. If we come around, you see a filter. Filter's a bowl filter. The pipe work and bracket all can stay in place, and the bottom will screw off. And then obviously inside there's a filter element that you can clean. It's washable. Just make sure it's tightened up when you go.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, there is a bleed screw on it, and I know this bracket's in the way of it, but they will unscrew. That'll unscrew. So if you ever do the filter, you have to bleed it. There's a bleed screw. It's a 10mm spanner or socket in there. Take the bracket off. The pipe work will hold the filter where it is. Just support it if you're going to screw anything, and then put it back out.
And put the bracket back on.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. I would do that annually, once a year. Check your filter. There's also a filter on the regulator inside. If we show you what's inside.
Yep.
It comes in through the tiles at the back here, and as you come down, I'll put a torch on it. That's it. A bit better. Down this tap here. So this tap will have. So I've just taken it off for now, but that will be secured back on there in a minute. Come through that into a flame fail device, and this has got. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. That's got a thermocouple that goes into the burner pot. It's actually a fuel system leading to the regulator. I'll tell you a bit more about the regulator now if you like. So behind this is a filter. I'll show you this one. Again, annually, but generally, if that filter outside is clean, you won't have any muck in here. So 2 silver screws, a silver plate, and a black gasket, and the filter just pops out. The filter only goes in one way up. So if you have a look at this little nipple sticks down, that faces down. If you put it in the wrong way up, it won't go flush. You take it out, turn it upside down, put it back in, it goes flush.
Right.
So again, I'll check that annually, but generally, like I say, if that filter outside's clean, this will be clean in there. So just pop that back together.
And that's washable.
That's washable again. Yep. Just make sure it's dry before you put it back in.
Yes.
And then light your stove as normal. And the air that's in there will find, as soon as the rest of the taps get turned on, the air will find its way into the regulator and then disappear, be replaced with fuel. Pinch it up. Okay, I'll also just take the lid off of the regulator, so I want to check it anyway. So again, on top, 2 silver screws. Whip that out. Look at some on the way out.
Yeah, good to see what's changed.
A bit tight for me and the camera operator. So 2 silver screws. That's your top plate. Sits like that. 2 silver screws would go there. Notice I've turned it to number 1. Before I've taken the lid off. You shouldn't need to take the lid off, to be fair, but I've turned it to number 1. Reason being, if you turn it to 0, that comes off and that springs out. So it goes spring, washer, then the pin. The pin, to put it back if it does, push it all the way down and then turn it so it goes in between the top plate and the rib. That's where it goes.
Okay,
so that's that.
That's your regulator.
That's the regulator top. Yeah. Inside the regulator is this part. So, and if your camera's good, you'll see a tiny slit there. If you allow muck to get through that filter into the regulator and gets onto that, then it can start mucking your settings up. However, you've got to wait a while for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this goes in. This spring, when I put it in, there's a nipple to this side of the housing. You can see that there. So it's just there. So I aim that spring to go onto that. There is a YouTube video online.
Oh yeah, of course,
which might make it a bit easier to understand and see a bit better. Not tucked around the back of the stove. It's just a regulator on its own.
Yeah.
Then when I put the plate back on, that silver tab top part, so that bit I've just pulled out,
Yeah.
goes through the hole on that.
Oops. Yep.
Yeah, on that part.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a feel through now. I'll just tell you about this tab as well, the float resets. So the tab off this end, I lift it, the floats will drop, and that will just generally rattle about now. So that's that part. So if we were to trigger, basically if you go onto choppy waters and your boat's doing kind of all this,
Yeah.
then it might recognise it and say, no, that's too much, and turn your fuel off. And that's just lift it, reset, and all that'll do now is rattle about.
Okay.
Sometimes for canal boats on flat water, it's generally the you get dragged out of a slip. Sometimes it might trigger, but I've not really known them to trigger.
I suppose it's designed for the fact that these go on sailing boats and
yes,
cruisers.
so this is class of the flat water, but it'll turn.
Just get a little bit of that, and then I can use that as comparison then when it gets warmer.
And here is the bench in place in front of the fixed fuel tank. It sticks out quite a bit, but I'm sure that we can find some way of disguising it. Well, that seems to have been a marathon and a half. The stove seems to have been a long time coming, but I hope you'll agree that it's worth it. We thoroughly enjoy the appearance of it and think it really makes a statement on the boat. I hope you agree. I'd like to thank you for watching and also for subscribing to my channel if you have. If you haven't, please consider doing so. Thank you to all my subscribers. I really appreciate you taking the time to subscribe and watch the videos that I put out. If you'd like to make comments, please do. I would love to respond to you. I respond to all my comments that I get, and I love interacting with my viewers. So I look forward to hearing from you. So until next week, and next week's video, which I think might be about the overheating engine problem and a solution. Fingers crossed anyway. So until next week and next week's video, bye.